أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Now we have to start to speak about the person of Mahdi, inshallah. After we discussed the concept and it's somehow became clear that this is a unanimous view among all Muslims, and only very few scholars have ever raised doubts about the concept itself. But when we come to the person of Mahdi according to Shias, then we are in difficulty. Because for the Sunnis, of course they have difficulty as well, because they say Mahdi is from the family of the Prophet, peace be on him, coming at the end of the time. But when is the end of the time? I mean, there have been many Mahdis, Sunni Mahdis in the history who claim to have come at the end of the time and declared themselves to be Mahdis, but unfortunately that was not the end of the time. It was the end of their lives. After, of course, they passed away, the time continued without justice and with oppression. We will discuss later on, inshallah, whether after Mahdi the world would continue or not. There might be different views there. However, there is one thing for certain, that he would not pass away before he has established justice on the earth. So anything coming in the past, anyone who has come and claimed to be Mahdi and has not established justice on the earth, we find certainly in retrospective especially, the claim to be a false claim. Now, we have both Sunni and Shi'i personalities who have claimed to be Mahdi during the history. Some say, I don't know, we have to make more thorough investigation on this, about those people of whom we know, or the history has recorded. They say there are about 50 Mahdis during the history. I'm sure it should be much more. I know of one myself who history has not recorded. He used to come to Queen Mary College when I was studying there and saying that I'm Mahdi and all of you should believe in me. A Turkish scholar, not a scholar, a spiritual man. And he was really, I mean, he's amazing. He was really shining. I mean, you would have been attracted towards him. And this is why many Mahdis in the history have attracted people. They were very spiritual people. They were people whose face attracted people, whose behavior attracted people. But unfortunately, I don't know why they made such lies of themselves. Now, let's see who did claim to be Mahdi for the first time in the history. Very close to the time of the Prophet, just after half a century after the Prophet, the claim was made for someone. Now, before delving into discussion about these personalities, if you remember, one of the arguments against the idea of Mahdi was that this concept has created lots of bloodshed in the history and has created so many false claimants. And if a concept is so divisive, why should we believe in it? And the most recent thinker who ever raised this objection was Abdul Karim Surushi in Iran, who raised the objection against Mahdi, saying that Mahdi is a false concept because all over the history we have seen people have come and claimed to be Mahdi, while this has added nothing to our Islamic understanding of God and of the world, but divisiveness and going down skirmishes and having battles and wars for that reason. This issue could be seen from different angle. I mean, why did people claim to be Mahdi for either their political reasons or for their personality problems, egoistic problems, whatever. Why did they claim to be Mahdi? Because the claim would have landed in the heart of Muslims, since it targeted one of the most important concepts which they believed in. So if we look at it from a different angle, we would see that people who made false claims to be Mahdi, they actually were misusing this belief which was very well established among all Muslim communities, and that's why they could somehow gather people around them, and some of them were successful actually in their political aims, calling themselves Mahdi. Politically they could gain success and victory and attract people. Now, these personalities whom we are going to talk about very briefly, some of them did not claim to be Mahdi. The concept was attributed to them. They themselves did not believe to be Mahdi. Their followers called them Mahdi. Some of them, of course, themselves called themselves to be Mahdi and made claims in that name. Let's look at the first person. It is estimated that during the past 14 centuries, over 50 people, well, 50 prominent people, I'm sure there are more less considerate people here, considerable people here which are not mentioned in the history. So 50 people either claimed to be Mahdi or such position was attributed to them. The first person to whom such position was attributed was Muhammad ibn Hanafiyah. He died 80 or 81 after Hijrah. That is about 70 years after the Prophet, peace be on him, in Medina, and was buried in Baqi cemetery. Now, of course, those who attributed the idea of Mahdi to Muhammad ibn Hanafiyah, they did not believe in his death, or they did not want to believe his death, because Mahdi is someone who would come and fill the earth with justice and equity. Therefore, these are called Kaysanis, followers of a person named Kaysan, claimed that he was Mahdi and that he did not die and was dwelling in Mount Radwa, close to Medina, where 2 lions were protecting him. Now, of course, lots of legends later on were made about Muhammad ibn Hanafiyah. You know, Muhammad ibn Hanafiyah was the other son of Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam from a lady from Banu Hanifa. And a very respectful person. He was, according to many accounts, the person to whom Imam Hussein alayhi salam made his will before leaving Medina towards Mecca, and then from there to Kufa. And there are questions why he did not follow Imam Hussein alayhi salam in his journey to Mecca and then from there to Karbala. The reason might be he was very old, first of all. Of course, not older than Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but to some extent he was less able to move, and he had very weak eyes as well. And the other reason was that no one knew that this was going to happen. I mean, Imam Hussein is going to be somehow intercepted on the way, and the battle would take place. Otherwise, many more people would have probably followed Imam Hussein in his journey to Kufa. Now, he is, as I said, very respectful man. After the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, you know, Zainul Abidin alayhi salam was completely isolated. He was very, very strictly on the watch. He could do nothing actually, no sort of political move, and of course it was futile after that incident for political movements to take place immediately. The people who were in Kufa, the Tawwabun, who repented for not helping Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they needed a leader. Now, of course, the leader should have been from Ahlul Bayt. There were many strong people in Kufa who could lead them, but they needed a leader from Ahlul Bayt. And Muhammad ibn Hanafiya was somehow related to Ahlul Bayt. He was from Ali alayhi salam, was related to Ahlul Bayt. And Mukhtar ibn Ubayd al-Thaqafi, who led the revolt afterwards and killed all those murderers who killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and took power in Kufa, and he conquered the whole Iraq. He claimed that he is acting under the orders of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. So the rumors went around that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya is the leader of all Muslims, and he is going to fill the earth with justice and equity, and he is the Mahdi. As I said, he did not have himself such claims, but probably he was not denying in a way to undermine the revolt which was taking place in Kufa. So this was the first person. Now, why in Radwa? Why they said he was in Radwa? I remember this statement, or this sentence that we have in Dua Nudba, which we somehow address Imam Zaman alayhi salam, and we say, Abi Radwa am ghayraha. I don't know where you are located, where are you dwelling, in Radwa or in some other place. Because of this historical report that the followers of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya claimed that he was in Radwa, some doubts was raised that this dua is fake and it is a made up thing of these Kaysanis, or made up after their claims, or somehow influenced by it, and therefore the whole idea of Dua Nudba and Imam Zaman was under question. Therefore, and the questions were coming from in Iran from Dr. Ali Shariati. You probably have heard of him. Sometimes very funny things become very, very important. I mean, this is a very, very simple issue, very trivial issue, but it really became a huge argument about Imam Zaman alayhi salam. This dua says Abi Radwa and Ghayraha, and Kaysanis believe that Muhammad ibn Hanafiya is in Radwa. So Ali Shariati wrote a letter to Ayatollah Tustari, who was the most prominent biographer of Rijal in his time, of reporters in his time, and he said that there are some questions about this issue, and people are now in doubt that all these things about location of Imam Zaman, Radwa, are somehow made up because of these historical stories which we find about Muhammad ibn Hanafiya and others. And of course Tustari replied in such a strong manner that Shariati later on wrote a letter that he said that we intellectuals are discussing issues with ignorance, not knowing that oceans of knowledge are sitting somewhere and we can go to them and ask. And he brought lots of historical evidence saying that all these issues about Radwa and other places which have come up with regards to other personalities are taken from traditions of the Prophet about Mahdi, that he might live in Radwa, he would be in such a place. All these details were taken from those traditions and attributed to these people, and therefore after the death of Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, people were asking, okay, where is Muhammad ibn Hanafiya? You said that he is Mahdi. They said, no, he is not dead, he is in Radwa, as the Prophet said Mahdi is in Radwa. This was the way the argument went. So this was an innocent man, of course. As I said, he did not claim to be Mahdi, but he was misused because of his position, because of his relation to Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, because of his close relation with Imam Hussein and Imam Zain al-Abidin. So he was used in this way to be called Mahdi.
Sheikh, I have a question here.
Yes.
Why wouldn't he himself, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, say out that I'm not Mahdi as you declared? Can you repeat the question?
The question is why he himself did not deny these claims and attributes which was made about him. Well, these things work in a very complicated manner. I mean, he was in Medina. Those people who claimed he is Mahdi were in Kufa. And there was always mediums who were going to and fro, going to Medina, bringing messages, taking messages. And there are lots of interesting stories here that how they actually changed the stories. I mean, they came to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, he said something, they went to Kufa, they said something else. And this is the case with about our Aimma alayhimus salam as well. They were living in Medina, the Shias were in Kufa. They even sometimes unconsciously, without knowing that they were doing it, because of their opinionated minds, they would have changed, or they would understand differently and would have changed it. And there are lots of stories about how Mukhtar actually changed the messages from Muhammad ibn Hanafiya to say that he has approved of me, I am Mahdi, he is Mahdi, and all such things. These are historical accounts, of course. They should be really verified. We do not want to accuse anyone, and on the day of judgment they come to us and say, oh, in Stanmore that day you were saying something against me, and they take us into account. Anyhow, the second person, Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Husayn. Now you see, most of these people should have been from the Holy Family, because if anyone outside the Holy Family claimed to be Mahdi, no one would have accepted, because everyone knew that Mahdi should be from Ahlul Bayt. Now, Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Husayn, again, this holy man himself was innocent of this attribution. He did not claim to be Mahdi. He even did not claim to be an Imam. He was just fighting for Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. But his followers later on, who created the Zaydi tariqah, according to our version of the history, who created the Zaydis, they had their own opinions about Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Husayn. Not all of them believed that he was Mahdi, but some rumors started to go around at that time that this is the Mahdi. And unless this concept was used, people were not motivated to put their lives there. And that's why the followers were trying to use many different sorts of means to motivate people. And on the other hand, their enemies tried to deter people by any probable, possible means at their hand. One of the major things which made many people to disperse from around Zayd ibn Ali was the question about Abu Bakr. What do you say about Abu Bakr? Of course, he didn't want to say anything about Abu Bakr, because many of his followers were people who respected Abu Bakr very much, and therefore he could not speak his heart. And that's why many people later on came and said, Zayd does not condemn Abu Bakr and what happened, and many of them who were extremist Shia saying that Zayd, or extremists on the other side, Zayd has not, for example, praised Abu Bakr and such things. Zayd ibn Ali ibn Husayn died 121 after Hijrah. That is at the time of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, at the time of Imam al-Baqir, and he was fighting against Banu Umayyah. He was Imam Baqir's brother, and since he revolted against Banu Umayyah, some of his followers regarded him to be Mahdi. And of course, after he was killed, he was betrayed against by the people of Kufa, and he was killed. After he was killed, before that, his followers quoted a report from the Prophet to prove that Zayd is Mahdi. They said, إن المهدي من ولد الحسين وإنه يخرج بالسيف وإنه ابن سبيح. Okay, he is from the progeny of Hussein alayhi salam. He revolts by sword, that means he comes out and fights, and he is son of a slave girl, which all of them, of course, were true about Zayd, but it does not mean that he was Mahdi. Especially, we had another report which said, Al-A'immat ba'di 12, This is a very famous hadith. تسعة من صلب الحسين وتاسعهم قائمهم. The Imams after me are 12, 9 from descendants of Hussein, the 9th of whom will be the Qa'im. So he was not the 9th, he was the 2nd descendant of Hussein, not the 9th descendant of Hussein alayhi salam. However, you know, when these political issues come up, some traditions are somehow neglected, some other traditions are emphasized to motivate people. After he was killed, you know, he had a very tragic death, and his body was hanged for several weeks outside Kufa, and then it was burnt, and very, very tragic death. And the Umayyad poet Hakam ibn Ayyash composed after his martyrdom something just to make the pains more for his followers. He said that Salabna lakum Zaydan ala jadh nakhlatin walam nara mahdiyan ala al-jadh yuslabu. We crucified Zayd for you on the trunk of a palm, and never we had seen a Mahdi crucified on a trunk, just mocking and ridiculing what they believed about him to be Mahdi, saying that this is your Mahdi who is crucified on the trunk of a pole. Now, this is a less innocent person in this regard, again from Ahlul Bayt. The third person from Ahlul Bayt who was regarded to be Mahdi, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn al-Hasan al-Musanna. Al-Hasan al-Musanna was the son of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and because his name was Hassan as well, so he was called Hassan al-Musanna, double Hassan. Of course, his father was Hassan, he himself was Hassan, and he had a son, Abdullah, who was the head of Banu Hassan at his time. And he had two sons. This Abdullah had two sons, Muhammad and Ibrahim. And they were very, very revolutionary, hot people. I mean, they never set sword down. And they always criticized Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq for not standing up and rising against Banu Umayyah and the oppression. But later on, I mean, as things transpired, one would understand that really the intention was not just for the cause of justice. There are many other things involved as well. Now, this Muhammad was a very young man when he was claimed to be Mahdi by his father, by Abdullah. He claimed that this is Mahdi, and this is the man who would rule and would bring Banu Umayyah down. He was so pious, so pure a soul, that he was called An-Nafsu Zakiyah, the pure soul. Because he was seen all the time praying, crying, and all these things. And I think the main person who led to his claim and also to his death was his father, who thought that through this Nafsu Zakiyah we could topple Banu Umayyah. Now, of course, it followed on at the time of Banu Umayyah. It came to Banu Abbas. His revolt was when the revolution had taken place, was victorious, but things went wrong. It was arranged that Banu Hashim would take the power, but Banu Abbas took the power. So he rose against the second Abbasid Caliph, Al-Mansur. Now, the following hadith was used for his cause. This is a Sunni hadith with regards to Mahdi, not a Shia hadith, but they used it with regards to Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Al-Mahdi man wuldi ismuhu ismi wa ismu abihi ismu abi. Mahdi is from my progeny. His name is my name, and his father's name is my father's name. So, what was his name? Muhammad ibn Abdullah, wasn't it? So the same as name of the Prophet, and his father's name was the same as the Prophet's father's name. So they used this. Okay, who else could be Mahdi? You see how simplistic minds were around, so that they could somehow very easily bring them in by such sort of arguments that, okay, Mahdi is from the progeny of the Prophet, his name is like the name of Prophet, and his father's name, so this is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, he's progeny of the Prophet, so he's Mahdi. I mean, very, very wrong and baseless arguments were made. Before the victory of the Banu Umayyah, now this is a very interesting story. I'm sure it tells a lot about the political situation of that era and the role of Shia Imams. Why they did not take part in any political activity? What was the situation? They didn't want to take part at all. Now, before the victory of Banu Umayyah, Al-Mansur, who was the second caliph, Abbasid caliph, used to say that Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn al-Hasan is the Mahdi of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because Mansur, his other two brothers, Ibrahim al-Imam and Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah, they were all in the movement supporting someone from Ahlul Bayt to come and take the power from Banu Umayyah. So they were allies with Bani Hashim. And they never thought that they would take the reign of the caliphate. They were fighting for Ridha min Ali Muhammad. Now this is very telling that how important and how widespread was the idea that the caliph should be from Ali Muhammad. And actually the Abbasids toppled the Umayyads by this argument that the caliph should be from Ali Muhammad. Now, of course, who is Ali Muhammad? The concept was known. It's the progeny of Fatima. These are Ali Muhammad, and everyone knew about it. Now, then some sort of political gymnastic was played. Towards the end of the Banu Umayyah and almost on the verge of the victory, people thought that, okay, why not Banu Abbas? These three brothers were very strong. Ibrahim al-Imam, Abu al-Abbas Safa and Mansur. They had sent their military commander to Khurasan, Abu Muslim, and he actually crushed the Banu Umayyah there. He conquered the whole Khurasan, and now that Banu Umayyah were just toppling down, they wanted to decide who should be the caliph. If things go right and if they are victorious, who should be the caliph? Now look at this political plot. Abu Muslim and his circle wrote two letters. One to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and one to this Abdullah ibn al-Hasan. That without them knowing of it, they wrote exactly the same letters, that now we are on the verge of victory, the caliph should be from Ali Muhammad, and we want to appoint you as caliph. To both of them, they wanted to test the situation. Now, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, as soon as he received the letter, he burnt it. This Abdullah became very, very excited. He went to Imam's door because they were all in one movement. Very excitedly, he said, there is something very important in the middle of the night. I have to speak to you. He said, what has happened? Why you have come so late to my house? He said, I have to speak to you. And he said, what is it? He said, I have received a very, very important letter that would change the whole destiny of Ahlul Bayt. Imam said, the letter you have received, I have received as well. So don't be deceived. These people are not going to give you this position. Have you sent Abu Muslim to Khurasan? He said, no. He said, do you know anyone there? Have you ever met someone there who now they feel that they are in your favor? He said, no. He said, why are you so excited? He said, no. You don't understand. You are jealous because the letter has come to me. I want to be the caliph, so you don't want me to. And all these disputes went. Now, however, However, of course, Abdullah was not going to be given, nor his brother Ibrahim was going to be given the caliphate, but they were bringing in a very, very young pious person as the image, and this was this Muhammad Nafsu Zakiyya, because he was a good image. And they claimed, now the claim came from whom? From Banu Abbas, saying that he is the Mahdi and he is going to lead us. But they knew that, okay, at the end, when things are going just to come to the peak, they can change the whole thing and take the... And this is what happened actually. Before saying this, there was a meeting before the victory of the revolt against Banu Umayyah. This Abdullah and his brother Ibrahim and Muhammad ibn Nafs Zakiyya and the three brothers from Banu Abbas, Abu al-Abbas, who became the first caliph, Mansur, who became the second caliph, and Ibrahim al-Imam, who was the bigger and was to become the caliph, but he died before the victory. They were all there, and everyone said that we want to give bay'ah to Muhammad ibn Nafs Zakiyya. Muhammad Nafs Zakiyya. They asked Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq to give bay'ah. He said, I don't. They said, why? Abdullah said, you are so jealous to my son because he's older. And Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq said, if this was going to come to any good conclusion, we wouldn't have chosen your son. We would have chosen you, who are more knowledgeable, more respectful, and we wouldn't have left you alone. However, I tell you, you know who will become caliph after the victory? It is this man. And pointing to Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah, who was somehow the weakest in mind among these brothers. Everyone there laughed. And then he told to Abdullah, don't be overexcited. You know who will kindle your son Muhammad? He said, you are joking. He said, no, this man, and he pointed to Mansur Abu Jahl, he is going to kill your son. And Sunni scholars, because this is a very well-known history, they have written that this is one of the karamat of Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, saying all these things before it happened. So the history is very interesting, and knowing it, we can analyze why our imams took such positions, which were somehow very, very moderate, completely isolated from politics, as against the Ismailis and others. Now, let's come back to this Muhammad. Imam Malik bin Anas supported his cause against Al-Mansur. Now, after, of course, the Banu Umayyah were defeated, suddenly everything changed. They didn't give Khilafah to Nafs al-Zakiyya, they gave it to Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah, and Saffah died after a couple of years, and Mansur came. However, this Nafs al-Zakiyya said that right from the beginning, I was going to be the caliph after victory, not you. So he didn't give allegiance to Mansur. And of course, many people supported. And at the beginning, Mansur also was very weak. He couldn't start fighting against them. So people like Imam Malik ibn Anas supported his cause against Al-Mansur. Wasil ibn Ata and Amr ibn Ubayd, the heads of Mu'tazila, they supported the cause of Nafs al-Zakiyya. Regarded him to be the best person to become an imam. Why not Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam? Because he never wanted to rise with sword. And according to these Mu'tazilis, anyone rising with sword and is just can be the imam. He was one of the most pious of his time, Nafs al-Zakiyya. That is why he was called Nafs al-Zakiyya. Now, he was given allegiance as Mahdi in 126 in Abwa. This is the meeting that I mentioned. 6 years before the downfall of Banu Umayyah, they gave bay'ah to this Muhammad Nafs al-Zakiyya. All Banu Abbas, all Banu Hashim, except Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. They gave bay'ah to this Nafs al-Zakiyya. 6 years before the downfall of the Umayyads. After Al-Mansur assumed caliphate in 136, so his brother Saffah ruled for 4 years, and then 136 he came to power. Nafs al-Zakiyya refused to pay him allegiance, saying that I was given the bay'ah, you yourself gave bay'ah to me, now you rise against me. Now eventually he revolted in 145 and took over Medina for 2 months before he was killed by the Abbasid troops. So not really a very just cause, just something which they had arranged amongst themselves, and it didn't come to good conclusion. Now, very funny, Muhammad al-Mahdi, Mansur called his son to be Mahdi. Now, why did he call his son to be Mahdi? Because according to arrangements, after him, his cousin should have become the caliph. And he called his son to be the Mahdi so that he removes his cousin and places him as the caliph. The third Abbasid caliph, he was the most pious of Banu Abbas, of course. He did not claim to be Mahdi himself. Again, his father claimed that he was Mahdi. Al-Mansur called him Mahdi to take allegiance for him against his own cousin Isa ibn Musa, who was his heir apparent. Now, let's come to a bit more modern age. This is long past history. Is there any question here about these issues before we move to modern age? Yes?
Just to clarify on the Nafs al-Zakiyya, if he was that pious as it's been propounded, what made him then decide that he was the one who should be given allegiance and therefore began to oppose Mansur?
Because they made him to believe that he was Mahdi. I mean, sometimes it happens. I mean, if your father or your family, all people around you saying that you are the Mahdi promised by the prophets, and you don't know what does it mean. You see, you don't know what sort of connection Mahdi should have with God. So you suddenly think that yes, you are Mahdi, and then ignoring all those other traditions from the Prophet, peace be on him. And sometimes you see people do not deny things for political reasons, and therefore because he really wanted to take power. As I said, he was pious as a young man. We don't know later on what happened, but he was a man of faith. Certainly he was a man of faith. And whenever Imam Sadiq alayhi salam saw him, tears came to his eyes, knowing that this man is going to be killed. He knew that he is going to be killed. And everyone thought, he was not a secret. Imam Sadiq was saying it to everyone, and everyone knew that Imam Sadiq was jealous. And that's why he was saying that, yes.
Once you mentioned that if a person is a Muslim, Allah will always protect him from the big errors, the serious mistakes.
Yes.
It's a very serious mistake.
Yes, that's right.
Just repeat the...
Yeah, the comment is that if a person is really mu'min, Allah would not let them to make very grave mistakes. And that's true. Because Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. And this mistake by Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Nafs al-Zakiyya was a grave mistake, calling himself Mahdi. Now, it was not a grave mistake to fight against Mansur or not giving allegiance to him. He was given allegiance in the first place. So in a sense, those around him like Mansur and others were on the wrong side, not him, because he had been given allegiance before. However, yes, claiming to be Mahdi is a very, very great thing. I don't want to talk bad about these people. Otherwise, I mean, yes, you can say that this is something which no one could accept from these people, especially not listening to someone like Ja'far ibn Muhammad alayhi salam, who was an exemplar sort of personality for everyone, not only for Shias. So not listening and just thinking that they speak out of jealousy. Let's leave that to God, inshallah. We will see on the day of judgment what will happen. Any other question? Yes. No, of course, if he believed that he was an imam, these Banu Hassan mainly did not believe that Imam Ja'far Sadiq was an imam. The A'imma from line of Hussein were imams. And this is one of the, of course, problems that we have in the history. And therefore, most of them became Zaydis rather than Imamis. One reason might have been, I mean, if we want to justify it, and inshallah on the Day of Judgment Allah wants to judge them with lenience, one reason is that they really were very motivated politically, and they thought that this injustice, oppression that we see, should be crushed, should be fought against. And that's why they didn't see their sort of ideal leader in Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq or Imam al-Baqir, who were just sitting and teaching lessons and not taking part in these political plays. And that's why they thought that Imam is someone who comes out with sword and fights. Otherwise, why should we call someone an Imam if he just sits at home and teaches? So that is the case. We have of course, on the other side, we have the other extreme that people say you should not ever take sword before Mahdi alayhi salam. This is the other extreme, because the A'imma did not say this. First of all, they said no one should claim anything or fight in the name of Mahdi. I think Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq once said to Nafs al-Zakiyah the same thing, that if you are fighting for Amr al-Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar, I support you, because this is good. But if you are fighting in the name of Mahdi, I disavow you, because this is not the time for it. Mahdi is not going to come now, and you are not the Mahdi. And therefore, we have these two extremes. One extreme say that before the time of Mahdi, we should do nothing and just sit and wait, which means that we have to abandon Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahy al-Munkar, and all these things. The other extreme is that at every time, no matter what is the situation, you have to stand and fight. And A'imma were on that moderate line in the middle, certainly. Yes?
Sorry, Sheikh. It seems what you're saying is the political opponents of the Bani Abbas were not our Imam, alayhi salam. So why was it that they were then such a good deal? They become a thorn in the side of these caliphs in some way?
You are right. The opponents were really Banu Hassan, certainly, and some other personalities from Ahlul Bayt. And they were in constant fight with them. I mean, Zayd, Yahya ibn Zayd, Nafs al-Zakiyah, and after them people were constantly, these people from Ahlul Bayt were fighting against, especially Banu Abbas, because they thought Banu Abbas usurped, somehow hijacked the revolution from their hands. Because everyone fought to bring a caliph from Al Muhammad, and then they said, we are from Al Muhammad, because Abbas is the uncle of the Prophet, and who is closer as a member of family than an uncle? So we are from Al Muhammad as well, and we are that Rida min Al Muhammad for which you were fighting. But the danger was that everyone knew the position of our A'imma, and that if one day they just change course or change policy and they want to rise, they would gather lots of following. But of course, there was no point doing it. I mean, if it was for just short, fleeting power, it might have been done. But the whole society was not ready for someone like Amir al-Mu'mineen to rule, let alone Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and others. So they thought that the best thing to do is just educate first, and then time will come when these people, generations after generations, where they are educated about Islam, then they will realize themselves what they have to do, what should be done, and those things.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
You mentioned that the followers of Zayd quoted from the Prophet that the Mahdi is a descendant of Hussein and is born of a slave mother.
Yeah.
Whereas Bibi Nargis Khatun was a princess. And would you refer to the fact that she had to...
No, she was a slave lady as well. Of course, she was a princess, but she was captured in the war,
yeah,
and therefore she became a slave lady. So the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the signs
from which I read is that Nafs al-Zakiyah will be martyred.
That's a different Nafs al-Zakiyah. We'll talk about him. Because Nafs al-Zakiyah means pure soul.
Yes.
Okay?
Is there any relation that a person like such is like him, or can we identify a person or a concept of Nafs al-Zakiyah? Is it?
You mean they used it?
Yeah.
No, because then that would have become against them. Because the tradition saying Nafs al-Zakiyah would be killed. However, this tradition about Nafs al-Zakiyah came later on through A'imah. It was not something through the Prophet, peace be on him.
But the qualities of a Nafs al-Zakiyah, is it similar to what this man had, or will it be a different?
No. It would be a pure soul which would be killed, which will wronged and killed without any reason and without any sin. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on now to something more recent. Muhammad Jaunpuri, 9th century or 15th century, 9th century Islamic calendar, 15th century. He was an Indian Sunni religious figure seen as the promised Mahdi by the community of Mahdaviya. Of course, later on they were called Mahdaviya. He was a Kazemi Sayyid, what a Sunni, of course. He had memorized the whole Quran at the age of 7. You see, these people who claim to be Mahdi, as I said, they had some centers for attraction. People were attracted to them for some reasons. Talent, purity, apparent purity, and all these things. That's why they were somehow attracted to them. And he was initiated to Chishti Tariqah in an early age. Chishti Tariqah is mainly the Tariqah which was developed in northern Afghanistan, Central Asia, and in India, Sufi Tariqah, in an early age, and was called Sayyidul Awliya by the age of 21. So, someone like Muhammad Nafs al-Zakiyah, at a very young age, he gained that type of popularity. At the age of 40, he claimed to have been informed by God that he was the promised Mahdi. The same age as our Prophet was informed by God that he was a prophet, so the same age he was informed by God, well, he claimed to be informed by God that he was Mahdi, and started his travel throughout India. And after his death, his son became his caliph. Anyone has any personal contact with these Mahdavis in India? Because still there are some followers of these Mahdavis in India. Anyone has any personal contact or personal story about it? No. Anyone follows them? Okay. Now, this very problematic person, Sayyid Ali Muhammad Shirazi Bab. This is 19th century. The founder of Babism, and later on Baha'ism, of course, and one of the 3 central figures of the Baha'i faith. He declared himself to be the promised Mahdi in Shiraz in 1844 when he was only 24 years old. And it's very interesting the way he claimed, or he was convinced to be Mahdi. Before him, there was a sort of belief in Iran due to Shaykh Ahmad Ahsai, which created this Shaykhiyah. And after that, Sayyid Kazim Rashdi. When Sayyid Kazim Rashdi was dying, he said that the coming of Mahdi is very soon. They were a mystical sort of tariqah. Mahdi will come very soon. And one of his students started to go around Iran to find Mahdi, Mullah Hussain Ali, to find Mahdi. And he went to Shiraz. He saw this man in the street, Bab, Ali Muhammad. He was a man with very attractive face, with a green turban. And as they met, they realized that they are like-minded. They are followers of that group. And he went to his house and he said, "Why have you come to Shiraz?" He said, "I'm looking for Mahdi." Because We are told that Mahdi is coming soon. And he said, what are the qualities of Mahdi, so that when we find him, we recognize him? He said he's a young man between 20 and 30, with a nice, beautiful face, with a green turban. And as he was saying that, he saw, oh, this man is the same. And he said, as well, of course, he would interpret Surah Yusuf in a way that no one has interpreted. And the same night, Bab started to write tafsir on Surah Yusuf and showed it to him. And he said, yes, so you are Mahdi. And in this way, of course it was more complicated, I've just simplified the whole story. In this way, he started to call himself Mahdi, and of course, just after 6 years he was killed. Certainly, of course, someone in this center of Shia faith coming out claiming to be Mahdi, not being able to prove anything about it, the ulama, of course, would not let him live. So this is what happened, and of course it was not ulama who killed him, but eventually to somehow quell the troubles, it was the powerful Prime Minister Amir Kabir who ordered him to be killed, because no one dared to somehow order his death. So he ordered him to be killed. And Amir Kabir was a great man, and somehow he brought moderation to Shia faith as well. He banned these tatbir and hitting head and lots of things that the Shia were doing until the time of Qajar. He was very, of course, daring, and he did not, was not frightened of anyone. Anyhow, now later on, these Babis, Bab had left someone as his successor, Subh Azal, he called him, and he gave very nice names to his followers, like Subh Azal, like the purest of the pure, like the Quds, and all these things, and Huruful Hayy, he called his 18 close disciples the living letters, and very nicely he could manipulate these sort of nice terms. And after him, of course, two people rivaled. One was Baha'u'llah and the other was Subh Azal. Baha'u'llah won the fight, and Subh Azal was defeated, but he had his own followers. Baha'u'llah had his own followers. And then these Babis, who were purely followers of Subh Azal, somehow were isolated. Now we have about 1,000 Babis in Iran, not more than that. But Baha'is, who also, of course, are followers of Bab as well, how many are them? Several million people around the world. Of course, I don't want to go into Baha'i faith, but it is just, it is not a religion as such. It is just something which calls for unity of all faiths, peace in the world, a sort of secularism which is very favorable to many people. They both want faith and want secularism, and therefore it is very attractive to many people, and many people are attracted towards this faith. Now, Muhammad Ahmad, he was a religious leader in Sudan. He's Mahdi of Sudan, of course, not this Mahdi that we have now, the contemporary Mahdi. The Mahdi who led the resistance in Sudan, a religious leader in Sudan who proclaimed himself the Mahdi in 1881 and declared jihad against Egyptian authority and the British army in Sudan. And this idea of Mahdi was very helpful, actually. It helped him very much to bring together. And it's interesting, as we go through the history, we see that this idea of Mahdi was something which we could call it part and parcel of Islamic faith everywhere in the world. I mean, if tomorrow I come and claim to be Mahdi, I'm sure I would attract lots of followers, certainly. Of course, after a couple of years I'll be killed. But I will attract lots of followers because the concept is very attractive for every Muslim, because every Muslim believes in it. So, declared jihad against Egyptian authority and the British army in Sudan. He raised an army and led a successful war to topple the Ottoman Egyptian authority and founded a short-lived empire in Sudan. Who else? Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani of Qadian. Now I'm sure you are more familiar with him than I am. Founder of the Ahmadiyya movement. Now people say that he claimed to be both Jesus as well as the Mahdi. Now this is very interesting. That's probably the idea of Mahdi was not enough. So he claimed to be both. But of course this is what people say. His followers say that he preached that Jesus Christ had survived crucifixion. So he accepted the crucifixion of Jesus, but he said that he had survived it and died a natural death, and he had appeared in the same manner, this Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and the style as Jesus, and had a spiritual likeness and affinity to him as well as being Mahdi. So Mahdi had a very close spiritual affinity to Jesus, and this is what he claimed. And of course Qadianis are well known to you, Ahmadis or Qadianis are well known to today. Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan of Somalia.
This Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, did he not also claim to be the last prophet?
Yes, he claimed to be bringing the new message. But it's very vague whether he claimed to be a prophet or being Mahdi but bringing the new message. It's vague. So some say he claimed to be a messenger, some say he claimed to be Mahdi. That's right. Of course, it's not fair for us to speak like this about a faith which is quite alien to us. We have not studied and investigated. We should not only listen to the lay followers of any faith to find about the faith. That's very important. I mean, if you ask about Shia faith from lay Shias, you will be completely misled and misguided that what is Shiism. And you should not ask the lay people. We have to make somehow scholarly research and investigation about what really they said and they claimed. Now, Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan of Somaliland, who engaged in military conflicts from 1900 to 1920. He was a Somali religious and nationalist leader who was referred to as the Mad Mullah or Mad Mahdi by the British. Well, if the British who were fighting this man were saying he's Mad Mullah, he was a wise man. He was a very clever person. No, really. I mean, you would expect that in such battles or wars, they try to attribute wrong things so that they make people. It's propaganda anyhow. So they called him Mad Mullah or Mad Mahdi. He led an armed resistance in Somalia for a period of over 20 years against British, Italian, and Ethiopian forces. And I'm sure he could not have done it without resorting to this concept of Mahdi, somehow bringing followers to himself. Rashad Khalifa. Now, did he claim to be Mahdi or a messenger? Again, is a bit vague. He was an Egyptian-American biochemist who analyzed the Quran from a numerological angle. He claimed to be the messenger of the covenant. Again, very vague. What does it mean, messenger of the covenant? And founded the Submitters International Movement before being murdered. I'm sure you all have read about Rashad Khalifa to a great extent. And he was assassinated in 1980 anyhow. This is the most interesting Mahdi, Juhayman al-Utaybi. He was a student of bin Baz in the University of Medina. Now, you would not expect someone, a student of bin Baz, to claim to be Mahdi. But he did. Anyone remembers the incidents of this person? Yeah. occupying the Masjid al-Haram in 79 and killing the Imam of Masjid al-Haram, and it was a sort of heroic, daring act that he did, taking all his followers to Masjid al-Haram. And I remember, I think Egyptian forces, Pakistani forces, French forces were brought in to take them out of Masjid al-Haram, because no one could, the Saudis certainly could not fight against them. Now, Masjid al-Haram, he seized the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca in November 1979 and declared his son-in-law to be Mahdi. He took his revenge from his son-in-law, declared him to be Mahdi. Juhayman expounded the main tenets of his movement in his Sab' Rasail. He actually had written before coming out with guns and taking Masjid al-Haram. He was a scholar, and he has several writings. In Sab' Rasail, he expounds his views. Why I have brought it here? Because it's very, very interesting. I mean, to see how the concepts about Mahdi in all Muslim circles is almost the same. The imperative, now, these 7 articles, these are the articles of his faith. The imperative to emulate the Prophet's example. In da'wah, we have to follow the sunnah of the Prophet, revelation, propagation, and military takeover. You shouldn't just go and make call and da'wah. If it doesn't avail, if it doesn't benefit, you have to take force, take arm, and change things by force. The necessity for the Muslims to overthrow their present corrupt rulers, since the Quran recognizes no king. Third, the legitimate rulers must have devotion to Islam and its practice. Rule by the holy book and not by repression. Have Qurayshi tribal roots. Does it string a chord in your mind? Qurayshi roots? Yeah. After me there will be 12 princes, all of whom from Quraysh, or al-a'immatu min Quraysh, and elected through bay'ah. The same thing as the time of the Prophet. The duty to base the Islamic faith on the Quran and the Sunnah, and not on the equivocal interpretations of the ulama. Well, something against us. And the advent of the Mahdi, this is his 5th teaching. The advent of the Mahdi from the lineage of the prophets through Hussein ibn Ali, to remove the existing injustice and bring equity and peace to the faithful. Would you expect such a statement from a Salafi? That Mahdi should come from the lineage of Hussein ibn Ali? Why a Salafi would say this? Because this is the most prevalent and authentic account of Mahdi that we have in both Shi'i and Sunni traditions. The duty to reject all worshippers of the partners of God, including worshippers of Ali, Fatima, and Muhammad. He's talking about us, although we do not do that, but certainly he's talking about us. Now, these two articles of faith, 5 and 6, are very interesting, because in the first place he's repeating something that Shias have been saying all through the history, that Mahdi will come from the... And in the second, he categorically proved that he's not a Shia. He's a very, very hardline Sunni, but he believes in that. And that's very interesting. And the duty to establish a puritanical Islamic community which protects Islam from unbelievers as they're not quote foreigners. Well, of course, this is due to the situation in Mecca and Medina at the time. The Al Saud are courting all sort of Western powers. Now, just in conclusion, as we can see in retrospect, none of the above could establish justice on the earth, for certain. So none of the above were Mahdis. They either created new divisions among Muslims, added a new sect to already existing plethora of sects, or led a political movement in a small area for a short period. So, if you are very pious, very attractive, with a pure soul, do not be tempted to declare yourself as Mahdi, because it takes you nowhere. The Mahdi, of course, you see, if you declare to be Mahdi, although you are very pious, very zealous about it or whatever, you either create a new sect, add a new sect to already existing sects, you create more division, or you just in some small area, you make some bloodshed and you go. That's all. So, this is the best sign to understand those people who, inshallah, we would not see such people in our time, who want to claim to be Mahdi. I mean, this is a good test. What are they claiming? What are they trying to do? Are they just trying to lead a political movement? Are they just trying to defeat an oppressor in some part of the world? Or their claim is more universal, something which would be accepted by all Muslims? Yes.
Just wanted to clarify something. Is this an exhaustive list, or have you just taken some of
No, these are just samples. No,
So there are other
there are many others. Yeah, there are many others. Just a sample. Those who are a bit more familiar to our memory. Yeah. Okay. Now, the next topic is we come to Ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, and we stop here. Inshallah, we'll continue after a couple of weeks. Yes.
Remember saying that Jesus said that after me there will come many false prophets. Rasulullah also said that after me there will come many false messengers.
Jesus said what, sorry?
After me there will be many false prophets. Rasulullah also said that after me there will be many false messengers.
False Mahdis, yes. False Mahdis. Yes, there will be many false Mahdis. This is hadith. Now, I don't remember whether this is from the Prophet or from Ayyimah alayhi salam, but there is a hadith that's after me there will be many false Mahdis, yes. But I'm not sure about Jesus' statement, after me there will be many false prophets. Although it happened, I mean, by prophets, not probably he meant apostles, those who claim to have some sort of inspiration from God. Okay. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I ask a question without going too much into detail about the Baha'i faith? Are Baha'is allowed to practice their religion in Iran presently?
Yes, they are. You see, there are lots of propaganda outside Iran about Baha'is, but no Baha'i has ever been arrested because of his faith in Iran.
Is it true that at present there are 9 going to be executed for practicing their faith?
No, not at all. Otherwise, you know how many hundreds of thousands people
because
should be executed in Iran.
On Women's Interfaith Network, which I'm a member of, a petition has come forward saying that 9 are going to be executed just for practicing their religion.
Why 9 should be selected out of hundreds of thousands of Baha'is in Iran? Well, they should have done something. Usually the Baha'is, because at the time of Shah, the Baha'is were well connected everywhere, especially with Israel, with other powers which are now regarded to be enemies of Iran. I mean, these people are charged with espionage, and according to the law in Iran, grave or strong type of espionage has the punishment of execution. And there are many Muslims who are executed for that reason. It's not only Baha'is. So, I mean, the best question would be why these 9 has been selected from all these hundreds of thousands of Baha'is in Iran to be executed.
So they are free to practice their religion?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But they don't have rituals like us to practice, you see. They are not allowed to propagate, to publicize because this is a sort of heresy in Islam which nowhere would allow to come out and practice in that sense. But for themselves, they are allowed like any other religion. Yeah. Okay? Thank you very much.